Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. May the blessings of God be upon you all. And before we welcome Sheikh Hamza Maqbul and all of you here, I would like to ask Islam Jabir to come up here and give us the recitation of the Quran.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وأنزلنا إليك الكتاب بالحق إليك الكتاب بالحق مصدقا لما بين يديه من الكتاب مهيمنا عليه فاحكم بينهم بما أنزل الله ولا تتبع أهواءهم عما جاءك من الحق لكل جعلنا منكم شرعة ومنهاجا ولو شاء الله لجعلكم أمة واحدة ولكن ليبلوكم فيما آتاكم فاستبقوا الخيرات إلى الله مرجعكم جميعا فينبئكم بما كنتم فيه تختلفون وأن احكم بينهم بما أنزل الله ولا تتبع أهواءهم واحذرهم أن يفتنوك عن بعض ما أنزل الله إليك فإن تولوا فاعلم أنما يريد الله أن يصيبهم ببعض ذنوبهم وإن كثيرا من الناس لفاسقون أفحكم الجاهلية يبغون ومن أحسن من الله حكما لقوم يوقنون. صدق الله العظيم. Some of the translation of what I've just recited from Surah Al-Ma'idah, which is chapter 5, verses 48 to 50. And we have revealed to you, O Muhammad, the book in truth, confirming that which preceded it of the scripture and is a criterion over it. So judge between them by what Allah has revealed and do not follow their inclinations away from what has come to you of the truth. To each of you we prescribed a law and a method. Had Allah willed, He would have made you one nation, united in religion. But He intended to test you in what He has given you. So race to all that is good. To Allah is your return altogether. And He will then inform you certainty over what you used to differ. And judge, O Muhammad, between them by what Allah has revealed, and do not follow their inclinations, and beware of them, lest they tempt you away from some of what Allah has revealed to you. And if they turn away, then know that Allah only intends to afflict them with some of their own sins. And indeed, many among the people are definitely disobedient. Then is it the judgment of their time of ignorance they desire? But who is better than Allah in judgment for a people who are certain in faith? Jazakumullah.
Jazakallah khair, Islam. It is with immense pleasure and honor that I welcome you all and Sheikh Hamza to UIC MSA's Islam Awareness Week. Today is the second day and the third talk of this week, titled, Will the Real Shariah Law Please Stand Up? It's a very catchy title, alhamdulillah. And it's inshallah given by Sheikh Hamza Maqbul. A little quick bio about Sheikh Hamza Maqbul. He was born in Whittier, California and lived in South California until the age of 10 when he moved to Blaine, Washington. After graduating from Blaine High School, he went on to attend University of Washington in 2004, completed a Bachelor's of Science in Biochemistry and a Bachelor's of Arts in Near Eastern Sciences, Languages and Civilizations. During his study at the university, he was the president of the Muslim Student Association for 2 years. It is one of the most active and largest and vibrant organizations at UW. So, mashallah. And then after that, after graduation, Sheikh Hamza Maqbul went to study for traditional Islamic studies, which took him to a number of countries, including Syria, Egypt, where he studied the Arabic language. Then after Morocco, Mauritania, and the United Arab Emirates, where he studied the madhab of Imam Malik, grammar, usul al-hadith, and the two renditions of the qira'ah of Imam Nafi'. And then finally Pakistan, where he had the opportunity to study tafsir, usul al-hadith, and the Hanafi fiqh. After all of this traditional work studies that he's done, he was given ijazatul tadris, which means the license to teach, as well as an unbroken chain of transmission by which to narrate the hadith of books such as the Muwatta of Imam Malik, Sahih al-Bukhari, Sahih al-Muslim, Abu Dawood, Tirmidhi, Nisa'i, and Ibn Majah. These are Sahih Sitta, the authentic books, the 7 authentic books. And after that, when he came back to the U.S., he spent 5 years as a resident scholar of Torah Institute, which is a non-profit religious and educational organization based in Seattle, Washington, which teaches students and prepares them for future endeavors. He was also a part of CARE Seattle, Islamic Relief, and a number of different non-profit organizations that serve the Muslim community throughout America. Now in 2012, Sheikh Hamza Maqbul accepted the position of Assistant Director of Dar al-Qasim, an institute of higher Islamic learning and research based in Glen Ellen, Illinois, where he is engaged in research, writing, and teaching. Inshallah.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسوله سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه وأزواجه وذرياته وأهل بيته ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين وسلم تسليما كثيرا كثيرا أما بعد. All praises to Allah, and may His peace and blessings be upon His servant and messenger Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and upon his companions, and upon his pure wives, and upon his noble family and progeny, and upon all of those who follow all their way until the day of judgment. A couple of things before we start, mashallah. First of all, I'm not Hamza Yusuf, and Aziz is not ever allowed to introduce me again. Secondly, I just wanted to share with everybody my happiness and pride, mashallah, in MSA for all the work that they're doing, all the difficulties that they're going through, all of the sacrifice that they're making in order to make this and other events possible. Alhamdulillah, I myself am an MSA member, like was mentioned in the biography, and I feel like I'm like MSA for life. Although I overheard some people say, oh, you know, I'm 24 now and now birthdays are not as fun anymore. And another brother says, yeah, when you get to like 35, then you start to hate them, you know? And I said, oh, shoot. So I'm I guess an uncle now because I'm supposed to stop hating or stop liking my birthdays. So anyhow, but still, I still have a lot of happiness, mashallah, when I see the MSA doing what they're doing. So keep it up, keep up the good work. The third thing I wanted to say is that although mashallah MSA members are very fervently attending their own events, this talk is more for people of differing points of view, or people who want to learn about Islam. And unlike other people, I don't really mind if people disagree with what I have to say or ask difficult questions, and I don't portray that I have answers to all of those questions anyway. So inshallah, if somebody wishes to ask a question or a clarification at the end of the talk, or if it's something that's necessary to understand what's going on during the talk, that's fine, inshallah. And especially if you have something controversial to ask or say or whatever, we'll give you priority, inshallah, over other people. And that being said, we talk about the question of Sharia law. Will the real Sharia law please stand up? MashaAllah, a reference to, I think, some rapper or something, right? There's all of this fuss in the media about Sharia being some sort of like, I think the word totalitarian code is usually thrown around. There have been state legislatures all across America that have debated bills to ban Sharia law in America, and really a lot of these bills are just nonsense. What happens is you cannot specifically name Sharia law because that's against the Constitution. So then what happens is they change the language in order to say like foreign laws or laws that are against the Constitution of the United States. And you don't need a law to do that. That's already part of our code. That's already part of the way the legal system happens. If anyone passes a law, even passes a law through government, much as judges according to a law that's against our Constitution, that's something already, there's mechanisms to overturn that. And there are a lot of people that are very afraid that somehow Muslims are going to gain the upper hand and gain influence, and they're going to erode the American lifestyle and all of this other scary stuff. And the fact of the matter is that that's only possible through a limited number of routes. One is that they can come and militarily enforce their way of life on Americans. And if they're half as scary as people claim that they are, if they had the means to do that, they would have done it a long time ago. And I do know some Muslims that are pretty scary people, that if they had the chance to, they probably would do something like that. And the fact of the matter is that, I mean, it wouldn't even be a contest. In fact, it isn't a contest. Militarily, America is the most powerful nation on the earth, not just by a little bit, but I believe the doctrine the Pentagon maintains is that the two largest powers after America should be able to fight and defeat them in a war handily without having to suffer from logistical problems or whatever. That's the state of readiness that we maintain. And in the dawn of nuclear weapons and weapons of true weapons of mass destruction and the like, which we, I'm not being anti-American by saying we do bear moral responsibility for having inaugurated that age. At least in some part. Some will argue that we were forced to do so, and there's some truth to that, but it takes two hands to clap, and we definitely did step up to the challenge and make these things. In this age, military conflict is not really going to solve anything, and even people who are relatively mentally unstable should be able to do the math and understand that. There's always people who are crazier than that even, but those people, alhamdulillah, thanks be to God that they very rarely make it to positions of real power. But the military option is not there. Nobody can coerce America to live in any way that Americans don't want to live. There is the other route, which is what? That somehow Islam becomes so popular that a majority of people, for example, vote to put in a constitutional amendment against eating pork or whatever. And if that happens, and I find it highly doubtful that it would happen, but if it does happen and a person is genuinely afraid of it, what they're afraid of is not really Islam. What they're afraid of at that point is democracy. and you have other problems you need to work through, and those problems are not linked to Islam. Those problems are linked to misgivings regarding the democratic process, the idea that the people know what's best for them, the idea that the people have the ability to form the laws and the governments that they feel best reflect their values and will best enhance their lives. And if you believe that the people are a bunch of bumbling idiots that need to have rule prescribed to them by other people through absolute means, be they tyrannical or benevolent, that's a different issue. That doesn't have to do with Islam. That's a political science type of issue. These are discussions that even happen within the Muslim world. So that's off the bat, the kind of threat of Sharia law is something that I find really ridiculous. And if it comes to people practicing their own religion in their own homes and not forcing other people to follow them, or within their own kind of the sphere of influence and within their own lives, within the framework of the U.S. Constitution and local, state, and federal laws, then that's something that nobody has a right to tell another person, you can do this or you can't do this. So you'll see a lot of Islamophobic rhetoric nowadays trying to suggest that Islam is not a religion and Muslims shouldn't be afforded the same rights that other religions are afforded. So there's a mosque in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, where there was a huge push by many locals. Can someone pick that up, please? It has the divine name on it. There's a huge push by locals who really didn't want to see a mosque built in that in that locality, and they even tried to challenge the notion that Islam is a religion that is entitled to all of the constitutional rights and privileges that people get under freedom of religion. And the federal government, literally in the middle of the case, sent them a memo saying Islam's a religion, knock this off, because if you rule anything other than that, we promise you we're going to overturn your ruling overnight. And this is something that's type of lunacy people have accused Islam of many things. Some of them are more justified than others, but nobody has credibly been able to accuse Islam of not being a religion. We pray, mashallah, 5 times a day. Our religious holidays, you would think that our God would give us a break. We actually have to go for a 6th prayer on that day. No one can accuse Islam of not being a religion. You may not like it as a religion, but nobody can accuse it of not being a religion. And so these types of kind of extremism people have, they need to just make peace with the fact that if you want to have true freedom of religion and true freedom of speech, you have to make space for people that you don't agree with. And in fact, the litmus test of freedom of religion and freedom of speech is that you are able to tolerate the fact that those voices that you detest are there. Otherwise, it's having freedom of religion for people who agree with you. That's something that Stalin and the like were all able to do as well. That's not any sort of achievement in democracy or in free society. So, with that being out of the way in the beginning, we asked the question, what is the Sharia? And why are people kind of obsessed with it? And the fact of the matter is, very few people who have a problem with Sharia have ever opened a book of Sharia. So I happen to be a teacher. My profession is to teach the books of the Sharia. So I'll disclose to you what the contents of those books are very briefly. So if you open a book of fiqh, which is the way that the Sharia is taught to students, the first chapter, almost universally and without exception, has to do with ritual purity, the division of things that are clean and unclean, and how a person is supposed to wash themselves in order to prepare for the prayer. And so that doesn't only have to do with ritual ablution, that also has to do with how a person is supposed to wash themselves after using the restroom, how a man and a woman after sexual intercourse are supposed to clean themselves in order to be able to go about their ritual lives and their daily lives, how a woman is supposed to clean herself after menstruation. These are extremely mundane issues. And it's very interesting that I think a lot of Westerners don't have an idea of how mundane in particular these things are. There was an Orientalist by the name of Hamilton who I believe in the 1800s, he came to British India. He was from England, and so he had the idea that the Muslims, they have their own courts and judges in India, and now that the British East India Company has to administer over these people, and we don't want to offend them, so we want them to, fit into our legal framework, but practice their own personal law. So he had the bright idea of, let's translate the Hidayah. Hidayah is like a master book of Hanafi fiqh. Let's translate the Hidayah into English so that Hamilton can, know where the Muslims are coming from a legal point of view. And so the British, kind of the colonial office, can understand, where the Muslims are coming from a legal point of view. Hamilton starts translating the book when he gets to the ahkam of hayd, when he gets to the ahkam regarding menstruation. He kind of freaks out because this is like Victorian England, and it's really impolite to talk about menstruation at that time, right? In fact, many people in the audience right now are probably cringing every time I say the word yourselves. I mean, it's part of life, right? It's part of life, being a human being, and that's part of the organic and holistic nature of Islam. So he doesn't know what to do when he gets there, because it's something a gentleman is not supposed to talk about. So he ends up translating the fiqh of hayd and anything having to do with sexual relations into Latin. The idea being that like a scholar will be able to read it, but like the general public, like the idea, like his mother doesn't have to be horrified by like seeing him write about like whatever women's issues or something like that. So that's basically what the first chapter of any book of Shariah is that urine is unclean, and if it gets into food you cannot eat it, and if it's something that is mixed with water you can't drink it, you can't wash with it, etc., etc., which a person would think is really quite common sense. Unfortunately, it's not. It's not at all. And I've never been inside I shouldn't say never, but I haven't been inside of a women's bathroom maybe since I was 4 years old. But in the men's bathrooms, you see people, they have the hem of their pants dragging along the floor, and there's drips of something in front of urinals, and they walk, and you see a very nice suit, person looks sharp, frankly they look really good, and they look like they're prepared to do some sort of big deal, and the cuff of the pants drags along the floor, and you just realize, wow, this is really gross. Maybe our forefathers and mashayikh, mashallah, what they used to teach in their fiqh books, it could use an ear, and people could bear with learning these things. But at any rate, that's the first chapter. The second chapter is what? The second chapter has to do with the ritual prayer. Every book of the Sharia, there are many different schools, Orthodox and Sunni schools of law. There are 4 of them, and then there are a number of individuals that are non-conformist scholars, and there are a number of heterodox schools, perhaps more than can be counted. All of them, they observe this order. So the second chapter has to do with the ritual prayer. Now, I never cease to be amazed by how people of other faiths that don't believe in the validity of Islam are very concerned with Muslims' theology and with Muslims' worship. That somebody, if you pray a curse against them, they become offended. And I say, hey man, you don't even believe God exists. Like, why should you care if we sit in if we sit in our mosques and curse you, which we don't do. And unfortunately, I shouldn't say we don't do. We have some, we have to be fair. We have some nut-headed people who are not, they're not. For lack of a better expression, they're not comfortable with the ways of godliness, and they do that. They'll utter curses and prayers and du'as and things like that. They'll say, oh God, destroy these people or those people or whatever, and generally those type of people, they won't be tolerated in the mosque for too long, I guess depending on what mosque you go to, but even then, from the point of view of an atheist, it shouldn't really be a problem, because if the person is calling on the spaghetti monster in the sky, it doesn't, it's not going to really lead to anything, is it? So it's somewhat innocuous. It's like a child believing in Santa Claus with the Easter Bunny. Perhaps from a scientific point of view, it's not 100%. 100% cogent intellectually, but what harm could it do in and of itself? and the idea is nothing. Otherwise, I've been asked in interfaith panels before, with a great amount of anger, that why do you believe people who aren't Muslim are going to go to hell? Why do you believe like an atheist who's a good person and who gives charity and is good to their neighbors and is helpful and lives otherwise a morally upright life, but just doesn't believe in God? So why do you guys believe that such people go to the hellfire forever? I said, first of all, being good to other people, you should seek a reward from them. And if you have a good relation with God, then you should seek a reward from God. So that's unreasonable. But that argument is not convincing to a person who doesn't believe in God in the first place. And so I said the second argument, which is more tailored to an atheist, is if you don't believe hell exists, why should you be offended that we think you're going there? I mean, it doesn't make sense to me, and there's some sort of fallacy somewhere in the process of thinking through that. But at any rate, it's the ritual prayer. You pray 5 times a day. You stand, you bow, you prostrate on the floor facing Mecca. It has very almost inane questions that we discuss, inane to a person from the outside, regarding, for example, if you're facing Mecca and you deviate from the exact direction of Mecca, to what degree is that deviation tolerated? Is it tolerated if you intentionally deviate? Because buildings in North America are built on the Roman system of facing the 4 cardinal directions, generally speaking. And so the direction of Mecca from here, using spherical geometry, interestingly enough, is northeast. And so if your building is aligned to the 4 cardinal directions and everybody stands praying north, what are you supposed to do? Is the prayer valid or is it not? Does it need to be repeated? Is it something that's permissible? Is there sin involved in that, etc.? And these are questions most people would be like, really, this is like kind of getting boring. I was kind of hoping for some terrorism and some hands getting cut off and blah blah blah. But this is not going to. Hollywood is not going to sell anything. No one's going to write a blockbuster book based on this stuff. Muslims don't even want to read it. What do you think? A non-Muslim would, except for, there's some people, but generally they really don't care. And you think I'm joking? You can. If you can hack my phone right now, that's like the last thing. People send me questions to answer. That's the last thing. It's a discussion between like 7 different trained seminary graduates regarding a mosque in Jacksonville, Florida, that has exactly that problem. And so that's the chapter 2. Has to do with all of these type of questions regarding the prayer. What's the 3rd chapter? Has to do in some books with zakat, with giving charity to the poor, and the obligatory charity, ritually obligatory charity to the poor, and some of them have to do with fasting. And then the ones that have to do with charity, the chapter afterward is about fasting, and the ones that have to do with fasting, the chapter afterward is ritual charity to the poor. The 5th chapter is Hajj. After that, the books talk about what? About marriage. And then after marriage, what do they talk about? Can you guess? Divorce. Thank you. It's kind of a bummer, but that's life. They go on like this. And so people say, okay, listen, whatever, you're telling us all of this stuff. We know from somewhere or another there must be cutting off hands somewhere and stoning adulterers somewhere and lashing people, etc., corporal punishments. And it's there. It's there. This is the law of Islam. A person who is caught stealing more than 10 dirhams worth of silver or a quarter of a dinar of gold, which would come out to, the silver comes out to like $50 or so. That person, it's the law that if the case is referred to the court and it's not settled privately between the thief and the one that's stolen from, that once the case becomes publicly known and there's proper evidence and the amounts of the types of evidence and etc., those are all details of the same nature of which direction you have to face. They're very very tedious and long details. If all of those cases conditions are met, then the person has their hand cut off. and if they steal a second time, they have their first time they have their right hand cut off, and they steal a second time, they have their left foot cut off. And then if there's a difference of opinion, if they steal the third time, should they have their left hand cut off or not, etc., etc. And there's details about the order and all of this other stuff, right? Now, someone says, aha, that sounds utterly horrible. That sounds like the worst thing in the world. We can't have people in America doing that. Well, okay, there's a couple of caveats that you have to understand. First of all, none of the corporal punishments of Islam, none of them are enforceable without sovereign power. Meaning, imagine there are 3 Muslims living on an island, right? So they have, like, for example, the Maldives, right? It's a nation in the Indian Ocean made up of thousands of islands. So just say there's 3 people living on an island and they're very devout, and Zayd steals from Amr, and then the third one sits as a judge between them, and he says, okay, you stole. In our Shariah, it's a sin for them to cut the hand of the thief off. Why? Because this is solely the prerogative of the government. This is an ancient concept. Because what? Because all of the corporal punishments, capital punishment, etc., etc., all of these are the sole prerogative of the state. If the state doesn't exist, these punishments don't exist. And that's something that all Muslims agree upon. So, seeing as how America is not a Muslim country, and we discussed how that's not possible in the beginning, or if it was possible, it would be through the democratic process, and that would be a fundamentally different reality than the one we're dealing with its own challenges that totally shift the debate to something other than what it is right now. It's not even part of our law to do that right now anyway. And I have never heard of now or in the history of the United States of anybody ever having their limbs amputated because of theft. So someone will say, well, the fact that you would even believe that for your government, in your whatever theoretical ideal state, means Islam is a horrible religion. And we say, if you believe that, good for you. That's your constitutional right. Please go on believing that. Please write books about it. Please go on TV and say to everybody, to all and sundry, please go ahead and do that. But that doesn't occasion, legislation against Islam, etc., etc. Now, lest we have some sort of, artificially pumped up victory that's handed to the people who have a problem with Islamic law, let us remember what? Let us remember that this is America. There are people who are serving 20 and 30-year sentences in jail for literally stealing less than what the price of what a person would have his hand amputated for in the whatever theoretically run Muslim theocratic state, which seems not to exist. I guess the only country that actually has the law of amputation implemented nationally is Saudi Arabia. Other than that, and in terms of population, it's like 20 million people, so it's like maximum of 2% of the Muslim world lives there, and it has its own problems with its system. But first of all, I want you to appreciate the fact that you still may think amputation is horrible and like a bad idea, but just appreciate the fact that the country of Saudi Arabia, for all the things about it that one could say that are bad, which there's a fair number of them, they actually have one of the lowest theft rates in the world. So that's how they deal with this problem. I mean, literally, unless you go in the Hajj season, in which people from all over the world are there, and it's really impossible to enforce anything. If you go for Umrah, for example, throw your wallet on the street, I promise you, it will be delivered to your hotel room by evening. People won't even touch it because of the fear of allegation of theft. A police officer will find it and take it to you afterward, because the law of theft also applies to them as well. That doesn't mean that some people may not consider that to be a decisive proof, but it does mean something, and so that's how they deal with that. And I know a lot of people, mashallah, there are people who are getting out of prison today that committed crimes before they even turned 18. They're charged as adults, and George Bridges, who's the dean of the College of Arts and Sciences at the University of Washington, where I studied as an undergrad. He told me that his PhD thesis was about convictions in courts in America for things that are on paper absolutely the same. The only difference on paper between or that's being looked at for the analysis of this the PhD thesis is that they're looking at what sentences are given to black convicts and what are given to white convicts, and what are the types of comments that the judge gives for the white convicts, and what are the types of judgments given for the black convicts. And he said that on average between 10 and something years longer sentence for black people convicted, black men convicted of the same crime that white men are convicted for comments like, this person is a menace to society, they should be put away, they should be taken out of society, society should be rid of them. Always accompany black convictions, and white convictions talk about, well, this person can change, they can turn a new leaf, they can do something better, they learn their lesson, etc., etc. And this is a reality we cannot dispute, because black people are at most a sixth of America's population, and they are half of the prison population. Anecdotally, all of my African American friends, out of 10 of them, 9 of them have been to prison before. And we talk about some almost saintly individuals. We have people who are people I couldn't imagine committing a sin, much less a violent crime. And all of them, they have tattoos and things like that from having been in prison. I'm not saying that we have to implement corporal punishment here. Even if I was, it's probably not going to happen. But what I do think is we should appreciate the fact that, our system is not perfect and other systems are not totally horrible. When you can understand that there may be some benefit in how different people do things, even though holistically you disagree with them, and when you can also understand that you may agree with the way, our system runs, that even though you acknowledge the fact that there's some imperfections in it, at that point you can have a genuine discussion about something rather than fear mongering and trying to then move the discussion into progressively more and more kind of surreal type scenarios, like claiming Islam is not a religion in front of a court of law. What are some other Sharia based punishments people have a problem with? Islam, for example, for a person who's never been married before, if they commit fornication, the Islamic punishment is what? Is lashing, 100 lashes. If a person is married, the punishment is stoning to death. So oh my God, that's stoning to death. Well, a couple of things. One is that the burden of proof in both of those cases is what? That 4 people witness the act other than the 2 parties to the fornication, that 4 people witness the act, quote unquote, like the thread going through the eye of the needle, which is the metaphor that the Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam used for the burden of witness. To see 2 people naked in bed together is not sufficient. Or that somebody come and admit in front of a judge that they did that of their own volition. And as far as I know, the burden of evidence in this particular issue has never been met through witness. Never in the history of Islam, never has it been met through witness. As a scholar of the law, I can tell you even a video is not admissible, because if you read about the way evidence works in Islamic courts, the witness of an upright person is considered to be the basis upon which court cases are decided, and it has actually a higher position than material evidence, forensics and things like that our court system values. So you can never convict a person of that. If people come and admit on their own, some may see it still as problematic, but definitely the kind of totalitarian fear that goes with thinking about someone being stoned to death, it has to be at least mitigated, knowing that a person does that on their own. I don't know of any country other than Saudi Arabia and Iran that actually implement the stoning law. Pakistan, which is the country that, or at least where the place where my father was born would end up becoming years after his birth. The first clause of their constitution is that no law will be held in abeyance to the Quran and to the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And to date, they've never stoned anyone in the entire country of like 160 million people. And trust me, look at the news, watch the news. It's not for a lack of people who are excited to do stuff like that, because there are a lot of crazy people in Pakistan. Trust me, man. And other brothers that are laughing. Your countries have crazy people in them too, alhamdulillah. And we're in America, and America also has no shortage of crazy people. So let's not get too carried away. But that's that, right? We have the law of retaliation in our law, right? The law of qisas, that if somebody kills somebody, that the family of the person, the murdered party, has the option, one of three options. One is that they can forgive the murderer. The second is that they can demand some sort of financial compensation for the murder. And the third is what? The law of retaliation, which is the law of an eye for an eye, which we have in America. We have the death penalty, both on a federal level and on in many states. And we practice it more frequently, as far as I can tell, than almost any other country in the world. I think we're behind like China. Neither China nor America have the ability for a person to be forgiven for their crime. And so I don't really see a whole lot of occasion for moral outrage there, because it's a law that we share. In fact, the Muslim law is a little bit softer than the American law regarding that issue. And there are many cases in America where appeals processes will go through, and the families of the murder victims will actually speak in the appeals process to get the death penalty waived in the case of murder, because of their either having forgiven the murderer or deeply and firmly held beliefs against the death penalty. And oftentimes they're heard, and oftentimes the judge will not hear any of it. And so that's that. Before we give a couple of minutes for question and answers, I'll take 5 more minutes. I know I said I would stop at 12:45, but I think I owed something because of the egregious introduction I received. So I'm just joking, man. I'm just joking. And that is that if you actually truly, like in a theoretical sense, ban Shariah law from American justice, what would that actually mean? And I think it's interesting. It's interesting to look at. So American law is based on precedent and traditions. Every cogent legal system is based on precedent and traditions, but the body of precedent and tradition American law functions on, this is something even more basic than the Constitution. Just the idea of like certain court procedures and whatnot, they're inherited from England. And so England, it's interesting that people refer to a constitution in England, and they have no written constitution. It's just tradition, basically, that they run upon. And so the tradition of English law is called common law. It's different than the European continental law, which is called civil law. Civil law is basically what the tradition, the European continent, receives from the old Roman system. And England, the difference between civil law and common law that was practiced in England is that the common law is something that was developed by the Normans, right? So you remember the Battle of Hastings, William the Conqueror, etc., etc. No. Anyway, so what happens? There's the kind of post-medieval or late medieval kingship in England was wrestled away from the Anglo-Saxons and taken by the Normans. The Normans are a people of Viking origin that will invade England and Ireland and parts of the coastal areas of mainland northwestern Europe, and some of them will stay there, and they will establish their own kingdoms. So there's a place called Normandy, that's where D-Day landed. So the Normans, they lived over there. Well, Edward the Confessor, the last reigning Anglo-Saxon king of England, his cousin William claimed that he had left his kingship to him after he died. And so there was an Anglo-Saxon king, an Anglo-Saxon nobleman by the name of Harold, who said, no, stay in France, I'm going to rule my country. And so they fought. Harold got put down pretty decisively at the Battle of Hastings, etc., etc. And so these Normans will go ahead and rule England afterwards. So you have like centuries for which kings of England are born in France. French is their native language. It has a great influence on the language, the English language, etc., etc. Well, these Normans, they had a world empire. They weren't just in Normandy. And so one of the places that they ruled was what? Was Sicily. So this is Chicago. There's a lot of Sicilians here, mashallah. And Sicily, before the Normans ruled Sicily, who ruled it? The Muslims ruled it for 300 years. And it was actually one of the most, because they abolished the kind of the feudal system in Sicily, and they emancipated the serfs and allowed them to own their own land. So Muslim Sicily was one of the most wealthy places in all of Europe, because once the people owned their own land, the production rates, they went through the roof. And so what happens is that it's a place of opulence and wealth, but it's so close to mainland Europe, and it's so close to Rome in particular. So the Pope was very upset about this, and so he commissioned a type of crusade in order to reconquer Sicily. And Roger of Normandy was basically commissioned by the Pope to take an army and take Sicily away from the Muslims, and he did so. And interestingly, unlike many crusaders, he actually was very enchanted with Muslim civilization. He learned Arabic. He used to wear a turban and a jubbah. He used to dress like an Arab. He learned Arabic so well that he used to write Arabic poetry. No offense or anything, but most of the Arabs in the MSA probably couldn't even read Arabic poetry properly. I know because I've taught them. Illa inshallah, except for very few exceptions. And so this is an impressive feat. And the whole Europe kind of treats him with some sort of mistrust, because they think this guy's getting into this Arab thing a little bit too much. It's a little bit uncomfortable. They nicknamed him the baptized sultan, meaning that he's just like one of them. The only thing is he claims that he's a Christian. Otherwise, there's no difference between him and them. So he'll build all these churches and monasteries that look like mosques, and they have ornate like calligraphy of the Bible in Arabic along the walls. And like a person, if he sees them, they're not going to be able to tell that this is not not anything but a Muslim place of worship. And so what happens is that this King Roger, he will hire the ulama, the Muslim scholars, basically to run his bureaucracy for him. And he'll do all of these things, and he'll adopt a number of legal kind of workings from the Muslims. And one of them, basically, and if I don't have time because we've gone over, but you can go look it up. The paper you can find for free on online. There's a Western Orientalist by the name of John Maqdisi. He's a Palestinian Christian. John Maqdisi wrote a paper regarding the Islamic origins of common law. And his thesis is that the beginning of the divergence between the common law and the civil law in the mainland of Europe has to do with Roger's interaction with the Muslims. And so he brings to us what? Systems of buying and selling on credit, which, mashallah, Americans are, if we banned that, our whole economy would collapse. And the second was what? Trial by jury. Trial by jury, which is one of the things that was absolutely, utterly absent from civil law. And the Normans loved trial by jury. Why? Because until then, what was the way of deciding the innocence of a defendant? Trial by what? Trial by ordeal, which wasn't banned until like the 12th century or 13th century. Trial by ordeal is what? You're accused of doing this and we think you did it, but what we'll do is we'll make you walk across a pit of fire. If you survive, then maybe God hooked you up and you're not guilty. And if you die in the middle, you were guilty, and good for you, you deserve to burn. Or they'd make somebody stick their hand in like boiling water for 3 minutes or something like that. They'd have trial by ordeal. What was the second most common way of settling civil disputes, which actually survives into America? We had a vice president get taken out by it. Duels. It's like a legal thing, right? that you go 10 paces, have the same gun, same everything, you match the two parties properly, and the idea is that the hand of providence, the divine will kill the person who's lying and let the person who's telling the truth live. Either that or the person with better aim and like quicker reaction times, right? So we even have like Alexander Hamilton. He was the vice president under Thomas Jefferson, right? So no one's going to accuse those people are like the actual founding fathers of this country. You know what I mean? And he got into a tiff with Aaron Burr, and so what happens? The 10 paces, turn around, bam, and the vice president of the United States gets blown away, and it's not by Muslim terrorists. It's by another citizen who gets off scot-free. Why? Because this is a custom. This is a legal tradition, a legal tradition of Western law, which is very fortunately banned because of the outrage soon after that, in no small part. But the Normans say, okay, well, compared to like duels and trial by ordeal, this doesn't seem like it's that bad, right? By the way, in Islamic law, trial by ordeal and duels were never lawful. If you kill someone in a duel, you're going to be processed for murder. If trial by ordeal is something I've never read in any of our books. I'm very frank. I hope you can appreciate by this point about what's in our frank and unapologetic about what's in our tradition. You will not find many people, Muslims or anybody else, much less that will so nonchalantly talk about the law of menstruation or the law of amputation for thieves or stoning people to death or whatnot. Many people find it unnerving, this guy is what's wrong with him. But I tell you very frankly, trial by ordeal is something, as a concept, it's alien to us. So, these are certain things, if you actually truly ban Sharia law, I guess you'd have to throw them out as well. And at any rate, to wrap the talk up, my goal was to get people to appreciate that there is some commonality, there is some difference. The commonality is enough that the fate of our civilizations, which really humanity is just one civilization, they're inextricable from one another. So this type of rhetoric is just going to be a cause for us to harm ourselves as human beings. And the differences are there, but they're not so much that a person can truly claim that another person is that much fundamentally different than they are, without running into some real severe intellectual problems and issues. So with that, we have a couple of minutes for questions. I would like to prioritize questions that come from people from outside of the MSA, and I would like to prioritize questions that are from people who don't agree with me. Yes?
So, a couple of questions. One is, you mentioned at the beginning how some people get upset by your belief that a non-Muslim dies, we're going to go to hell, I guess. And that kind of triggers memory. So my problem is that different with the Muslims. I'm Jewish, and many years ago my grandmother passed on, and she was a very sweet lady. And it always bothered me that many Christians think she's in hell. And it's not a big deal. I live in a majority Christian population. I get along well. Jews well in this country, there's no issues at this time. But it just, so I can kind of see how that would, I don't know if you want to respond, how that would just bother people, because when a sweet, innocent person is punished for something, you're supposed to be appalled at the punishment. That's kind of what bothers me. The other question I have is, you mentioned stoning for adultery, but it's not in the Quran. Okay? So, and you also mentioned that almost no one does it. So, why not just get rid of it? And it's not in the Quran, no one does it. Just move on. So those are my questions.
So, the fundamental concept that's there in the first issue, it's a concept of creed more than anything else. And that's the concept of the absolute sovereignty of God. We don't believe that God is bound by an external standard of justice. Rather, He is the only standard of justice unto Himself. So if you were to take every pious and righteous person from day one until the end of times and throw them in the hellfire. We don't believe that he is morally culpable for something, just like a person who purchases a brand new car and has free legal title to it. If they take it into their property and then break all the windows, we don't believe that that person has committed a crime. So that's the first issue. So we don't judge God. That's why there are some theological problems, for example, with Jewish theologians that they grapple with, like the Akedah, like this sacrifice of what you call of Abraham for his son, and we don't really see it as a theological problem, because God has the right to ask anything of anyone at any time, and it's our good fortune that He chooses to have His mercy outstrip His wrath. But were He to, in an alternate reality, choose something other than that, there's nobody who can morally question Him. This is a theological position we have. The second thing is that we have a theological position that the person who turns their back on God, God turns His back on them. This is a general precept. As far as your grandmother or my grandmother is concerned, we are prohibited from saying so-and-so is in the fire, so-and-so is in paradise. We hope for the best, we pray for the best, and we say in general somebody who turns their back on faith, or really, to be very blunt, on our faith, we believe that person is ineligible for salvation in the hereafter, with certain notable exceptions. But that being said, we're not allowed to or encouraged to make judgments on specific people unless through divine revelation, like through some verse of the Quran or whatnot. It's established that person is in the hellfire, and there are very few people like that. And what faith is something that's not tangible. It's a divine secret that is between the slave and his Lord and her Lord. And this is part of our creed as well, that everybody will be astonished with God's mercy on the day of judgment. Astonished. It's going to not make sense that this person also, we thought this person was toast for sure. So that's something not necessarily, I don't know if it alleviates or allays your I guess tension.
I wasn't that worried about it.
Yeah.
I moved on.
Yeah.
But it was just something that I can understand why that would bother me.
Yeah. And that's okay. The fact that someone believes something different and it bothers. There are many beliefs that other people have that bother me as well. But the idea is that the botheration should be held in check by the fact that we have some sort of common rules that we deal with each other in this life through, and that we respect each other to a level that we don't become a thorn in each other's side, and the rest of it's going to get sorted out one day or another. The second issue regarding the stoning, as Muslims, we don't believe that the Quran is the only source of divine revelation and legislation. And the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, the sayings and the legal precedent we receive from the Prophet ﷺ, handed down, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, handed down through his companions, it's overwhelming that there is a punishment of stoning for an adulterer who is or has previously been in a consummated marriage. What is the point of hanging on to it? One of the benefits of hanging on to the teaching of it, even though it may never be implemented, is just so a person can understand the enormity of this sin. And this is something that I personally believe in. Many will disagree with me, and that's okay, but I personally believe that the society we live in right now is paying horribly for having neglected the moral severity of adultery. And so what happens is you just have a whole lot of things. The sex worker trade. You have children that are born in situations where they don't know who their father is, or where they are not afforded a proper house to live in, and they grow up. And unfortunately, not to cast a condemnation on those children, because it's no sin of their own, but unfortunately the statistics show that they are unless they come from very wealthy socioeconomic backgrounds, they are going to be more likely to go to prison. They are more likely to be stuck in poverty. They are more likely to commit crimes. They are more likely not to be able to, get an education and fulfill, the dreams that a normal human being would be entitled to. And so you have things like pornography, which leaves a generation of young men and women looking at other people as sexualized objects and more likely to disrespect people, their humanity, in order to fulfill something connected to their kind of corporeal reality, which I think is horrible. I think it's utterly horrible. And so if people had a reminder, and this is a very grave and stern reminder of, at least in the spiritual realm, how horrible this act is, that there's some benefit in that. But that's just my opinion. We have some questions here. Do we have time? Can I do this quickly? If a person steals food because unable to feed his family, would he get the same punishment? No. In times of what you call famine, the punishment for amputation is suspended. This is part of our law. And you get the punishment is for theft for something that's not of need. There is no punishment for stealing food. What is Sharia law on rape? Does the victim have to marry the rapist? Heavens no. There's a silly law in Morocco. I shouldn't say silly. I mean it's a relic of an older time. And the relic is what if two people commit adultery? They give some sort of ease to. They give some sort of ease because the adultery is almost unprovable in the court, and they give some sort of ease to the victim, because what happens, victims oftentimes can't get married after rape because of the cultural stigma, which is not something that's every society has a different standard regarding that. And so in order to give the woman a life afterwards, supposedly they instituted this law that the rapist will have some sort of mitigation in his punishment, or the adulterer, male adulterer, if he marries the woman that he commits adultery with or whatnot, as a way for her to have some sort of semblance of a normal life. This is not part of Islamic law. This is a local custom that they have that's been justly overturned. Otherwise the punishment in Islamic law for rape itself it's debated by ulama, but it's the death penalty. Because when a man rapes a woman, he steals something from her that in many ways no one can ever give back through any other sort of compensation, and it's a problem that she'll have to deal with for the rest of her life, even if nobody stigmatizes her. There are women that have been raped before, and they can never have a normal relationship with another man ever again, and it's very tragic. Islam doesn't say that a woman has to marry her rapist. وَالْعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ. Allah Ta'ala protect us from ever having to deal with such a horrific act of oppression. The U.S. media often portrays suicide bombers as having done this out of religious beliefs, but I don't understand how that relates to Muslims in Islam at all, because suicide is a sin. Okay. Jazakumullah khairan for the comment. Any other questions, or do we have to roll?
Do you have any other questions?
Does anyone have? This is going once, twice? Yeah, go ahead.
About the chopping off the hands. So you said there's actually a threshold for the amount of money that a person steals. Such that you would have your hands cut off. Well, what exactly would that convert to in dollars, in American dollars?
10 dirhams. Each dirham is around 3 grams. So 30 grams of silver. How much is it trading for? Maybe you can just do it on your phone.
You said 30 grams of silver?
Yeah. You can look it up on your phone, or so someone look it up on their phone or so. Anyway, Jazakumullah khairan. Thank you so much for being. If anyone wishes to, I'll be around for a couple of minutes if they have any other questions. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.